The wind howled over barren fields, carrying dust and whispers of dread. Cities once alive with laughter now seemed hollow, shadows of themselves. News reports flashed endlessly across screens. A virus spreading faster than anyone anticipated, wars erupting where peace once held, crops failing under unforgiving skies. People whispered that something was coming, something that had been foretold long ago. In ancient scrolls, hidden in the depths of sacred texts, figures were described, riders on horses of strange and haunting colors, each carrying a purpose beyond mortal understanding. They were called the Four Horsemen, and their arrival marked the beginning of an end that no one could fully grasp. Some believed they were symbols, metaphors for human suffering. Others feared they were real, agents of a divine reckoning, roaming the earth to bring judgment. Yet, whether symbol or reality, their presence could not be ignored. The signs were everywhere. A white horse galloped across the pages of history, its rider crowned with authority, spreading conquest under the guise of peace. A red horse trampled the earth with fire and bloodshed, bringing conflict that nations could not contain. The black horse measured famine, weighing the lives of the innocent against scarcity and greed. And the pale horse, pale as death itself, leaving despair in its wake, claiming souls in silence. You might think these stories are distant, abstract, and irrelevant. But when famine grips a city, when war erupts without warning, when disease spreads faster than science can catch up, and when death claims more than just the elderly or the weak, the whispers of prophecy feel alarmingly close. What if the Four Horsemen are not merely a story from dusty scrolls, but a lens through which we can view our world today? Every headline, every tragedy, every catastrophe could be a shadow cast by their invisible horses. And yet, there is more than fear. In the chaos, there is a lesson, a warning, and perhaps a way to see hope amidst the despair. This is the story of the Four Horsemen, not just as agents of destruction, but as mirrors reflecting humanity's choices, its consequences, and the fragile balance between survival and annihilation. So, fasten your mind to the history of prophecy and the pulse of modern reality, because what you are about to witness is not just the story of ancient riders on colored steeds, but the unfolding echoes of their arrival, the tremors that shake our world today, and the silent question that lingers in the air. Are we merely spectators or participants in this age of reckoning? Long before the first cities rose, before empires stretched their hands across continents, a vision was given, a warning etched into the scrolls of time. In the book of Revelation, words like fire and shadow danced across parchment, describing four riders on horses of colors that seemed to defy human understanding: white, red, black, and pale. These riders, known as the Four Horsemen, were not simply figures of imagination. They were warnings, symbols, or perhaps instruments of fate itself. The first rider, mounted on a white horse, carried a bow and wore a crown. He was the embodiment of conquest, of ambition unrestrained by conscience. Every battle that reshaped nations, every war that toppled kings, whispered his presence. Stickmen in the background wielded swords, shadows of armies stretching across maps, arrows flying from city to city, showing conquest spreading like wildfire. Yet, conquest was not always about destruction. Sometimes it was subtle, ideas invading minds, laws changing societies, movements sweeping across cultures. This rider's path was cunning, invisible to many, yet undeniable to those who watched history unfold. Then came the red horse, with a rider whose power was raw, unfiltered violence. Blood spilled where he went. Civil wars, massacres, revolutions. He was there in the heart of conflict. Minimalist icons illustrate flames, swords, and broken shields, stickmen clashing in chaotic skirmishes. Every human act of rage, every fight born from fear or pride, reflected his shadow. The red horse did not discriminate. The innocent suffered alongside the guilty. War, in this sense, was more than a political struggle. It was the manifestation of the rider's relentless pursuit of chaos. The black horse followed, its rider clutching scales. He measured scarcity, famine, and injustice. Grain, coins, bread, and water icons flowed across stickman villages, illustrating life weighed and rationed. Crops failing, food becoming a luxury, prices skyrocketing. The black horse reminded humanity that resources are finite, that imbalance brings suffering, and that greed or mismanagement can make famine inevitable. Each scarcity, each ration meal, was a reminder that the world operates on a delicate equilibrium. Break it, and the rider's scales tip toward devastation. Finally, the pale horse, pale as death itself, its rider named Death, followed all the others. Iconic skulls, 6 stickmen, and fading silhouettes populate the background. Disease, plague, natural disaster, everything invisible yet deadly seemed to trail behind this horse. Its presence was the culmination, the silent finality of all that the previous riders set into motion. Death did not need to chase. He followed quietly, patiently, claiming those who were already weakened, those who were exposed, those whom history had placed in the crosshairs of suffering. But the prophecy was not merely about fear. Hidden within these visions was insight. Each horseman was a reflection of human choices, human ambition, and the fragility of life. The white horse rode where ambition ran unchecked. The red horse trampled where hatred and pride prevailed. The black horse moved where greed and mismanagement caused imbalance. And the pale horse came for all, impartial, inevitable, reminding humanity of mortality. Stickman visuals subtly show arrows pointing from human actions to the riders, connecting cause and effect in a clear, visual narrative. Even in ancient times, these warnings were not ignored. Prophets, scribes, and seers wrote them down, told their communities, painted images to be remembered. Their purpose was not to incite despair, but to awaken awareness. The Four Horsemen were mirrors, not monsters, reflections, not fantasies. They asked humanity, will you notice the patterns? Will you respond before it's too late? History itself became a canvas illustrating their presence. Alexander's conquests, the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Black Death, and countless revolutions, each bore the echo of one or more horsemen. Stickman armies march across maps, plagues ripple through villages, famine icons flash over farmlands. Through minimalist animation, viewers can see connections forming, patterns repeating, lessons ignored or learned too late. Yet, there was hope, even in the shadows. Prophecy was never destiny. Awareness could alter outcomes. Societies that learned, that adapted, that showed compassion, survived, and sometimes even thrived despite the chaos. The horsemen were warnings and consequences, but human action could slow or soften their impact. Stickman figures build shelters, share food, heal the sick, and negotiate peace, highlighting the power of choice. By understanding the Four Horsemen, not as distant figures from Scripture, but as ongoing symbols, the world gains perspective. They are reminders that ambition must be tempered, that violence has consequences, that scarcity must be managed wisely, and that life is fragile yet precious. Each horseman is both a warning and a teacher, if only humanity is willing to learn. As we look at today's headlines, the horsemen seem ever-present. Wars rage in distant lands. Famine threatens populations. Pandemics emerge unexpectedly, and death touches communities in ways both tragic and preventable. Minimalist graphics show stickmen reacting to news icons, maps with flashing zones of conflict, empty shelves, and hospital beds. The prophecy, once ancient and distant, now feels immediate and undeniable. And so, the stage is set. The Four Horsemen have been named, their paths traced through history, their lessons offered. The question remains, will humanity recognize the signs and act, or will we allow the riders to gallop unchecked, bringing consequences that echo through generations yet unborn? The vision has begun. The pages of prophecy are alive. The horsemen wait, and the world holds its breath. As the centuries passed, the Four Horsemen continued their silent march, not in the sense of galloping through every village, but through patterns of human events that echoed the prophecy. Those who studied history closely could see their presence in the shadows, in the tremors of society that hinted at a world being reshaped by forces beyond immediate comprehension. The white horse, the rider of conquest, left its mark in every war, every empire that rose and fell, every ideology that swept through populations. Stickman icons march across maps of Europe, Asia, and Africa, arrows pointing toward conquered cities, banners fluttering atop castles, kingdoms collapsing under the weight of ambition. Yet conquest was not always violent. Sometimes, it came in the form of innovation, ideas that spread like wildfire, restructuring societies, economics, and politics. The horsemen's influence was subtle, a new religion converting nations, a philosophy reshaping minds, a movement changing the course of history. Even when unseen, his shadow shaped the world. Then came the Red Horse, and its story was written in blood. Civil wars erupted, kings fell, revolutions flared, and the cries of the innocent echoed through the streets. Minimalist stickman figures clash in chaotic skirmishes, fires rising from towns, weapons flashing, shadows of conflict engulfing regions. The Red Horse thrived wherever hatred, pride, and misunderstanding took root. But violence was not only on battlefields. It existed in neighborhoods, in oppression, in the ways humans treated one another. Its presence was pervasive, relentless, and often invisible until it was too late. The Black Horse, weighing life against scarcity, traced its path through famines and economic collapses. Grain, bread, coin, and scales icons appear on screen, stickman villagers reaching for resources that were no longer sufficient. In medieval Europe, the Great Famine took millions. In modern times, droughts, inflation, and political mismanagement left countless families hungry and desperate. The rider's scales moved quietly, tipping towards suffering, reminding humanity that balance and justice were essential to survival. Icon animations show empty shelves, rising prices, and bread being rationed. Visual cues that connect ancient prophecy to the harsh realities of human life. And finally, the Pale Horse, pale as death itself, followed all the others. Disease, plague, natural disasters. Its presence was a quiet inevitability. Stickman figures collapse as virus icons float above, tornadoes and fire symbols swirl in the background. The Black Death, the Spanish flu, modern pandemics, they were all shadows of the Pale Horse. But death was impartial, touching all, reminding humanity that life is fragile, fleeting, and deeply precious. Its impact was amplified wherever the other riders had already carved paths of chaos. Even today, the Four Horsemen seem to cast their shadows. Wars flare across continents. Famine and food insecurity affect millions. Pandemics strike with rapid ferocity, and global mortality reminds us of life's fragility. Maps flash with hotspots of conflict. Icons of food scarcity and hospitals appear. Stickmen react in fear, panic, and struggle. The prophecy, once ancient and distant, now resonates as immediate and urgent. Yet the horsemen do not act alone. Human action, or inaction, amplifies or mitigates their influence. The white horse gains momentum where ambition runs unchecked. The red horse feeds on hatred, pride, and prejudice. The black horse thrives when greed and mismanagement dominate, and the pale horse follows the trail left by neglect, vulnerability, and suffering. Minimalist arrow animations connect human decisions to the rider's actions, creating a visual cause and effect narrative that reinforces the moral of the prophecy. Some signs are subtle, easy to overlook. Political corruption, economic inequality, environmental degradation. These are the quiet markers of the horsemen at work, appearing in graphs, charts, and maps. Stickman figures protest, vote, negotiate, and adapt. Others are undeniable. Wars that destroy cities, famines that strip communities of life, pandemics that overwhelm hospitals, natural disasters that leave destruction in their wake. In every instance, the Four Horsemen are mirrored in humanity's choices and circumstances. The world itself becomes a canvas illustrating their influence. Minimalist animations overlay timelines, showing centuries of conquest, war, famine, and death side by side. Stickmen traverse these timelines, icons of swords, bread, virus, and skulls marking key events. It becomes clear that while prophecy sets the stage, human history is intertwined with the rider's presence. We are both actors and observers, participants in a narrative that has been unfolding for millennia. Yet there is a paradox embedded in these signs. Awareness creates opportunity. Recognizing the white horse's influence can guide leaders to temper ambition with wisdom. Understanding the red horse allows societies to address hate before it becomes violent. Seeing the black horse can prompt proactive measures to prevent famine and scarcity. Accepting the pale horse's presence encourages preparation, compassion, and care for the vulnerable. Minimalist stickman icons illustrate communities responding, building shelters, sharing food, wearing masks, and aiding the sick. Even natural phenomena can be interpreted through this lens. Tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, and fires, while scientifically explained, take on symbolic meaning as manifestations of the horseman's influence in a world already teetering on imbalance. Animation shows stickman towns dealing with disasters, emergency icons flashing, bridges and homes collapsing, weather patterns swirling. Through this, prophecy and reality merge, allowing viewers to see the Four Horsemen as both timeless warnings and mirrors reflecting modern challenges. And yet, not all is doom. Every act of awareness, compassion, and resilience is a counterforce. Stickman figures plant crops, negotiate peace, treat the sick, and innovate solutions. The white horse can be redirected toward positive leadership. The red horse's violence can be mitigated by diplomacy. The black horse's scarcity can be alleviated by distribution, technology, and policy. The pale horse's shadow can be softened through health measures and preparation. The horsemen, therefore, are not solely harbingers of destruction. They are catalysts for human reflection, growth, and action. As the sun sets across continents, minimalistic maps and stickman silhouettes display hotspots of horseman activity, illustrating their modern echoes. The audience begins to see patterns forming. The riders are not myth. They are embedded in the cycles of human civilization. And with that recognition comes responsibility. To ignore them is to invite catastrophe. To observe, learn, and act is to potentially change the trajectory of history. In the end, the signs across the world are undeniable. The Four Horsemen are visible not as literal riders, but as the consequences of human behavior amplified across societies and centuries. They are etched into the fabric of our past, present, and future, challenging us to see beyond fear and understand the complex interplay between prophecy, choice, and consequence. The stage is set, the signs are evident, and the riders continue their march. Humanity stands at a crossroads. Will we heed the warnings etched in scripture and history, or will we allow the horsemen to shape our fate unchecked? Minimalist stickman visuals pause on a world map, horse icons subtly appearing over hotspots, connecting prophecy to reality. The world waits and watches. The Four Horsemen appear unstoppable, yet their power is not entirely independent. Every rider thrives on the actions, choices, and failures of humanity. Conquest, violence, famine, and death do not act in a vacuum. They are amplified by human ambition, neglect, and greed. Stickman icons illustrate leaders sitting on thrones, markets fluctuating, armies marching, showing how human systems interact with the rider's influence. The white horse, the embodiment of conquest, rides strongest where unchecked ambition prevails. Leaders who seek power without wisdom, nations who expand without justice, movements that prioritize dominance over ethics, all feed the horseman's influence. Minimalist animation shows stickman kings crowning themselves, generals pointing at maps, and arrows flowing from cities to indicate expanding empires. Conquest may seem glorious on the surface, but beneath lies disruption, fear, and instability. The rider's crown is not merely symbolic. It represents authority that bends morality to ambition. Meanwhile, the red horse, the bringer of violence, gains momentum wherever hatred, pride, and fear fester. It is not always war between nations. Often it is conflict within communities, families, and even within the human heart. Iconography of flames, swords, and clashing stickmen depicts how small sparks of anger can ignite broader destruction. The red horse thrives on the human tendency to escalate, to retaliate, and to justify aggression. Violence begets violence, and the rider's path spreads like a contagion, leaving societies destabilized and hearts hardened. The black horse, with its scales of scarcity, moves silently through every mismanaged system, every economy that places profit above life, every government that ignores the needs of its people. Stickman villagers reach for coins and bread, only to find empty shelves. Arrows trace the flow of wealth from the powerless to the powerful. Scarcity is rarely random. It is a consequence of inequality, corruption, and misallocation of resources. The Black Horse reminds humanity that the systems we build determine how suffering is distributed. When balance is ignored, famine follows, and the scales tip toward despair. The Pale Horse, the ultimate harbinger, follows all others with quiet inevitability. Death is impartial, yet it is magnified where the other riders have already wreaked havoc. Disease spreads faster in war zones. Famine weakens the body, leaving communities vulnerable to natural disasters. Stickman figures collapse, virus icons float above, and environmental hazards swirl in the background. The Pale Horse does not discriminate, yet it is shaped by human vulnerability, by choices that fail to protect life, by systems that neglect care and preparation. And yet, power is rarely concentrated in a single hand. Behind the headlines and the chaos, complex networks of influence amplify the horseman's reach. Political alliances, economic systems, multinational corporations, and even ideology can act as invisible reins, guiding the rider's impact. Minimalist infographic visuals show stickman figures connected by lines, leaders, banks, factories, military icons, revealing a web of forces that can either restrain or unleash destruction. Some patterns are easy to miss. Media narratives, propaganda, and misinformation can fuel the red horse, while resource hoarding and policy failures feed the black horse. International competition, territorial disputes, and ideological clashes empower the white horse. And inaction in the face of disease, environmental crisis, or inequality allows the pale horse to claim more lives. Every decision, every neglect, every greed-driven choice reinforces the prophecy. Stickman arrows trace cause and effect, visually connecting human action to the rider's progress. Yet there is an unsettling truth. While humans can influence the riders also expose humanity's weaknesses. Conquest reveals ambition untempered by morality. Violence exposes anger and division. Scarcity unmasks greed and inequality. Death highlights vulnerability and neglect. In this way, the Four Horsemen act not only as instruments of fate, but also as mirrors, reflecting the consequences of human behavior with brutal clarity. Minimalist mirror icons and stickman reflections illustrate this concept, showing society's choices reflected in the rider's paths. The tension becomes clear. The horsemen appear as forces beyond control, yet their existence is inseparable from human systems. Their actions are intertwined with choices made in palaces, boardrooms, and households. Stickman icons show a chain. A leader signs a law, a community reacts, conflict spreads, famine emerges, disease follows. The animation demonstrates the invisible link between decision-making and consequence, between ambition and chaos, between neglect and death. But here lies the twist. Even as the horsemen seem unstoppable, awareness and deliberate action can alter outcomes. Policies that limit reckless ambition, efforts to resolve conflict peacefully, systems designed to distribute resources fairly, and healthcare infrastructures that protect the vulnerable, all can slow or redirect the rider's influence. Minimalist stickman animations show communities rebuilding, farmers distributing food, doctors treating the sick, diplomats negotiating peace. The horsemen may remain, but their impact can be mitigated by conscious human effort. History is full of examples. Some empires rose only to fall because ambition was unchecked. Wars ended when diplomacy succeeded. Famines were prevented or alleviated through collective action. Pandemics were curtailed by scientific and social intervention. The Four Horsemen, though terrifying in description, are not absolute. They are amplified or restrained by humanity's own hand. Stickman icons visually narrate these historical interventions, connecting prophecy to tangible actions. The power dynamic is clear. Humanity can feed the horsemen, control them partially, or resist them. Each rider serves as both threat and teacher. They reveal the fragility of systems, the consequences of selfishness, and the urgency of compassion. Stickman visuals show split paths, one leading to chaos, another to mitigation, emphasizing choice. Every decision echoes in the world, altering the horseman's course. Yet, despite our efforts, the rider's presence remains a constant reminder. Vigilance is never optional. Each generation faces the challenge anew, encountering familiar patterns under new guises. Minimalist stickman animations overlay modern events: economic collapse, civil unrest, environmental disasters, disease outbreaks. The past repeats in the present, urging the world to recognize cycles and act wisely. In the end, the question is not simply who controls the game, the horsemen, humanity, or fate, but whether humanity recognizes its role within it. Each choice, action, and inaction writes the next chapter, shaping the rider's path. Minimalist arrow animations trace the interconnectedness of every decision, every ripple in society, every consequence that feeds the prophecy. The Four Horsemen are neither myth nor inevitability. They are consequences, reflections, and catalysts. They expose the vulnerabilities of human ambition, anger, neglect, and mortality. They thrive where we fail, but they also recede where we act with wisdom, compassion, and foresight. Stickman icons illustrate communities making choices that redirect arrows of destruction into pathways of resilience and hope. And as the world continues its complex, interconnected dance, the riders wait, not just as symbols of judgment, but as mirrors challenging humanity to see, reflect, and act. The game is ongoing. The stakes are immense. The Four Horsemen are present, persistent, and watching. Amid the vast sweep of history and prophecy, it is easy to speak of the Four Horsemen as abstract forces, distant concepts riding across maps and timelines. But their impact is never abstract. For every headline, statistic, or icon on a screen, there are countless personal stories, lives touched, altered, or ended by the horseman's path. And it is in these human stories that the prophecy becomes deeply tangible. Consider a small village in a drought-stricken region, where the black horse quietly casts its shadow. Stickman icons illustrate dry farmlands, empty water wells, and villagers struggling to feed their children. A mother, once hopeful, now weighs every grain of rice, every drop of water, unsure how to stretch meager resources. Her hands tremble as she divides the little she has, her worry etched into every line of her face. Around her, children wait silently, trusting adults to navigate a scarcity they cannot understand. This is the black horse made real. Scarcity does not arrive suddenly. It creeps, exposing vulnerability, testing human ingenuity and resilience. In another corner of the world, the red horse stomps its fiery path. Minimalist stickman figures clash in civil unrest, flames rising, weapons drawn. A father shields his children as chaos erupts in the streets, a conflict born from fear, pride, and misunderstanding. His home becomes a battlefield, his neighbors opponents, and even friends strangers. The red horse does not discriminate, yet its presence amplifies every spark of hatred. Violence can appear sudden, but it is fueled by tensions, unresolved grievances, and the choices humans make. Through the chaos, families endure, adapt, and find ways to survive, but the scars remain, etched in memory and in history. The white horse appears in the corridors of power. Leaders, generals, and influencers make decisions that ripple across nations. Stickman icons show a leader signing a decree, arrows pointing from capitals to distant cities. At first glance, these acts may appear strategic, beneficial, or necessary. But ambition unchecked has a way of spreading beyond intent. Conquests reshape lives, topple cultures, and alter futures in ways invisible to those who wield authority. A scholar in a distant city studies these movements, realizing that knowledge can either empower or constrain the horseman's reach. The white horse is subtle, often invisible, yet its impact is profound and lasting. Meanwhile, the pale horse waits in the shadows. Disease does not roar like fire or clash like armies. It whispers. Stickman icons depict sick villagers, empty hospital beds, and the gradual decline of health. A doctor tirelessly moves from patient to patient, her efforts heroic but finite. Death is impartial, yet it follows the paths carved by the other horsemen. The pale horse is amplified by scarcity, violence, and ambition, claiming the vulnerable first. Families mourn silently, communities adjust rituals, and the rhythm of life is punctuated by loss. Yet, even in the face of death, courage emerges. caregivers, volunteers, and ordinary people step forward, softening the horseman's shadow. These stories are not isolated. They ripple outward, interconnected by global systems. A famine in one region affects markets halfway across the world. Conflict displaces millions, triggering economic and humanitarian crises elsewhere. Pandemics cross borders, exposing inequalities in health systems, governance, and infrastructure. Minimalist visuals illustrate stickman figures traveling across maps, arrows linking countries, icons of food, medicine, and currency flowing along these paths. The Four Horsemen, though originating from prophecy, are inseparable from the complexities of human society. Yet, there is resilience. Communities adapt, innovate, and respond to the challenges the horsemen bring. Villagers implement irrigation systems, NGOs distribute aid, local leaders mediate disputes, and global coalitions address pandemics. Stickman animations show bridges being rebuilt, crops planted, hospitals expanding, and armies standing down. The horsemen may arrive, but they cannot fully suppress human ingenuity and compassion. Every act of preparation, every hand extended in aid, is a countermeasure, an acknowledgement that while prophecy warns, action empowers. Even in wealthier nations, the Four Horsemen leave their mark. Economic collapse, civil unrest, and public health crises illustrate that no community is immune. Minimalist visuals depict urban stickman populations facing shortages, hospitals overwhelmed, and protests erupting in city squares. Here, the horsemen's influence is subtle, intertwined with policy, culture, and human behavior. Awareness of their patterns allows societies to mitigate impact, but ignorance or denial can amplify consequences. Stories also reveal the emotional toll. Parents, teachers, and neighbors carry the weight of decisions made under scarcity, threat, and uncertainty. Iconic visuals illustrate stickman figures comforting children, mourning lost loved ones, and navigating fear. The prophecy is not only a map of destruction but a lens through which the human heart can be examined. How courage, empathy, and sacrifice emerge in response to threat. Consider a young nurse in a city plagued by pandemic, a small icon of a virus floating above. She works tirelessly, yet resources are limited. The pale horse looms, yet her actions save lives, slow transmission, and offer hope. Similarly, a farmer in a drought-prone region invents a method to conserve water. The black horse is present, but ingenuity mitigates its impact. These stories demonstrate that the horseman's presence challenges humanity to rise, to act with foresight, courage, and compassion. Stickman icons depict the ripple effect of these interventions, arrows showing how small acts influence broader outcomes. Conflict, scarcity, and death are universal experiences, yet each story highlights human agency. The white horse challenges leaders to exercise wisdom. The red horse calls for restraint and reconciliation. The black horse urges equitable distribution and foresight. The pale horse reminds all that life is precious, fragile, and deserving of protection. Minimalist visuals overlay these lessons as icon cues next to stickman figures navigating challenges. The prophecy, when viewed through personal stories, becomes vividly real. It is not merely about distant events in Scripture. It is about individuals making decisions that alter the course of communities and nations. Each stickman narrative, each icon, each timeline represents a life affected, a choice made, and a ripple sent across the tapestry of history. Ultimately, the personal stories of the Four Horsemen reveal both peril and potential. They are constant reminders that the world is interconnected, that actions carry consequences, and that humanity's response to threat defines the trajectory of history. Minimalist animation emphasizes cause and effect, showing the horsemen's shadows looming, but human figures taking deliberate, impactful action. As the sun sets across these stories, one truth becomes clear: prophecy is not destiny. The horsemen may arrive, but human courage, compassion, and ingenuity can reshape the narrative. Each life affected, each choice made, is part of the ongoing struggle to navigate the balance between inevitability and agency. Stickman icons illustrate individuals, communities, and nations interacting with the writer's influence, highlighting resilience, hope, and the possibility of change. The Four Horsemen are present in every story, in every map, in every heart. And as their paths intersect with ours, we are reminded that awareness and action can transform prophecy from fear into guidance, from warning into opportunity. The stage is set, the stories are unfolding, and the audience bears witness, not just to the horsemen, but to the human capacity to endure, respond, and adapt. The Four Horsemen, though relentless in their march, are never met with complete silence. Humanity has always responded, sometimes wisely, sometimes tragically late, but always with a measure of courage, ingenuity, and resilience. Where conquest, violence, famine, and death threaten, people rise, systems adapt, and communities innovate. Stickman icons illustrate leaders, citizens, and organizations acting, arrows tracing their efforts across maps of the world. In the realm of conquest, the white horse's influence is met with diplomacy, alliances, and international oversight. Nations that once expanded aggressively now engage in treaties, economic cooperation, and collaborative governance. Minimalist stickman visuals depict diplomats shaking hands, treaties signed, and arrows linking capitals, showing the flow of negotiated peace. While ambition cannot be fully erased, humanity has learned to channel it in ways that minimize devastation. Conquest is no longer absolute. It is balanced by strategy, law, and the moral imperative to protect populations. The red horse, representing violence and war, encounters both intervention and prevention. Peacekeeping forces, grassroots mediation, and conflict resolution initiatives attempt to halt its rampage. Stickman icons clash but are gradually separated by mediators, arrows showing ceasefires and humanitarian corridors. Communities educate against hate, foster dialogue, and teach the next generation the cost of unchecked anger. Violence, though persistent, is mitigated where awareness and foresight prevail. The red horse loses momentum when humans refuse to feed it with fear, retaliation, or indifference. Scarcity, driven by the black horse, is challenged by innovation, equitable distribution, and global cooperation. Stickman farmers, logisticians, and aid workers collaborate, arrows showing resources flowing from abundance to deficit zones. Agricultural advancements, trade agreements, and humanitarian networks counter famine before it reaches its worst potential. Technology, from irrigation systems to genetically resilient crops, softens the black horse's impact. Even in impoverished regions, minimal stickman visuals illustrate water collection, grain storage, and community kitchens, showcasing humanity's ability to intervene proactively. The pale horse, though impartial, can be slowed or mitigated by preparation, healthcare, and social responsibility. Medical innovations, vaccination campaigns, and disaster preparedness programs act as barriers, softening the inevitability of disease and death. Stickman doctors, nurses, and community workers animate across maps, virus icons shrinking as protective measures expand. Though the pale horse will always cast a shadow, human foresight, empathy, and resilience create pockets of safety, life preserved amidst broader mortality. Global coordination has amplified the world's response. International organizations, technological innovations, and knowledge sharing allow humanity to react faster than ever before. Minimalist infographic visuals show stickman representatives in conferences, arrows connecting countries, and icons for food, medicine, and logistics moving efficiently. The horsemen remain, but the magnitude of their influence is constrained by human ingenuity and collective action. Yet, the response is not uniform. Some regions are slow to act due to corruption, lack of resources, or political instability. Here, the horsemen's effects are amplified. Stickman icons depict gaps in infrastructure, failing crops, and hospitals overwhelmed, highlighting that action, or inaction, directly shapes the rider's power. Awareness alone is insufficient. It must translate into tangible intervention to alter the course of destruction. Personal stories further illuminate the global response. In a city threatened by famine, community kitchens and volunteer networks emerge. Stickman figures distribute food, water, and supplies, arrows showing aid flowing to the neediest. In conflict zones, mediators and grassroots peacebuilders work tirelessly to prevent escalation. Medical teams combat pandemics, deploying vaccines and care where it is most critical. Each small action, minimal as it may seem, collectively counterbalances the horsemen's march, demonstrating that humanity's capacity for resilience and innovation is profound. Education and foresight play crucial roles. Awareness campaigns, historical lessons, and cultural memory inform populations about the signs of each horseman, allowing proactive measures. Minimalist visuals illustrate schools, seminars, and public messaging reaching stickman communities. The white horse's conquest is countered by diplomacy, the red horse's violence by conflict resolution, the black horse's famine by equitable policy, the pale horse's death by preparedness and healthcare. Knowledge becomes armor, vigilance a weapon. But even as interventions succeed, challenges persist. The globalized nature of modern society means that a problem in one corner of the world can reverberate elsewhere. Stickman icons show arrows linking continents. Famine in one region affects markets globally, conflict displaces millions, and disease travels rapidly across borders. The Four Horsemen, though mitigated, are never fully absent. Humanity's response must be continuous, adaptive, and multifaceted to keep pace with their enduring influence. Technology has become an essential tool in this fight. Drones deliver aid to remote villages, satellites monitor crop failures, and data analytics predict disease outbreaks. Minimalist stickman visuals show technicians managing systems, arrows tracing aid from production to delivery. The horsemen are challenged not only by human courage but by human intelligence applied collectively, transforming raw action into strategic prevention. Stories of heroism and ingenuity abound. In one region, a young engineer devises a water filtration system that saves an entire village from drought. The black horse is present, but ingenuity softens its impact. In another, community leaders negotiate ceasefires between warring factions. The red horse loses ground. Doctors combat a sudden pandemic outbreak. The pale horse still lingers, but lives are preserved. Stickman animations emphasize ripple effects. One action in a small village impacts the broader system, showing how individual initiative compounds globally. Yet the narrative is complex. The horsemen are intertwined with human systems. Their influence reflects societal choices. Economic inequality, environmental degradation, political unrest, and cultural conflicts act as accelerants. Minimalist infographics overlay stickman figures with arrows connecting wealth, resources, and influence, visually representing how systemic flaws magnify the horseman's reach. Conversely, strong governance, global cooperation, and ethical leadership act as brakes, slowing the rider's momentum. The world's response is a dance of adaptation and intervention. Where horsemen appear strongest, humans often rise with creativity and courage. Stickman visuals depict emergency drills, food distribution, vaccination campaigns, and diplomatic summits, showing that proactive engagement creates resilience. The horsemen may shadow the world, but the light of human effort fights against darkness. Despite the victories, the lesson is clear. The Four Horsemen are neither myths nor irrelevant symbols. They are consequences of human choices, amplified through action and inaction. Minimalist stickman animations emphasize that each decision, individual, community, national, or global, shapes their influence. The world's response is ongoing, imperfect, but vital, proving that prophecy is not a sentence, but a call to awareness and action. As maps flash across screens, stickman figures interact with icons of swords, grain, viruses, and crowns, illustrating the intertwined nature of threats and responses. Conquest, violence, famine, and death are met by diplomacy, compassion, innovation, and courage. Humanity is both challenged and empowered. The horseman's presence is undeniable, yet never absolute. Ultimately, the world's response is a testament to resilience. Each act of intervention, each decision to aid the vulnerable, each measure to prevent violence or scarcity, is a countermeasure against forces that would otherwise reshape life unchecked. Minimalist visuals show ripple effects. One village's water conservation reduces famine, one treaty halts war, one hospital's preparedness saves lives, illustrating that small actions scale to global impact. The Four Horsemen remain, but their march is neither unchecked nor unchallenged. Humanity continues to learn, adapt, and respond. The story of the world's response is not one of perfection, but of ongoing struggle, resilience, and hope. A visual, emotional, and strategic counterpoint to prophecy, perfectly suited to the minimalist animation style where each stickman and icon represents a story, a choice, and an impact. And so, as the horsemen ride across history and reality, the world does not stand idle. From small communities to global networks, humanity responds, adapts, and perseveres. Stickman icons pause over maps, arrows showing interventions spreading, a visual testament to the enduring capacity of human effort against the shadows of prophecy. The horsemen may be present, persistent, and powerful, but they are not omnipotent. The Four Horsemen are not trapped in the past. They cast shadows forward, into the uncertain terrain of tomorrow. While history has shown their presence repeatedly, the modern world offers unprecedented challenges and opportunities. Minimalist stickman visuals overlay global maps, arrows indicating hotspots of potential impact, icons of swords, bread, virus, and crowns pulsing to signal risk. Understanding what may come requires attention, awareness, and strategic foresight. The white horse, the embodiment of conquest, may no longer ride with swords alone. Its influence is found in technology, economy, and ideology. Stickman figures illustrate boardrooms, data centers, and global networks, arrows tracing the flow of influence across continents. Artificial intelligence, global markets, and geopolitical shifts become modern tools of conquest. Nations and corporations expand influence not only through armies, but through innovation, trade, and information. The lesson remains ancient. Ambition without ethics can reshape lives, nations, and systems far beyond what is immediately visible. The red horse, harbinger of violence, evolves in form but not in essence. Conflict today is not always conventional warfare. Cyberattacks, political sabotage, ideological extremism, and civil unrest are modern expressions of its path. Minimalist stickman icons depict glowing network lines, protesting crowds, and weapons, showing how anger and hatred find new channels. The red horse thrives where division, fear, and pride persist, amplified by technology and misinformation. Yet every intervention, diplomacy, education, community building, acts as a brake, countering escalation. Scarcity, driven by the black horse, remains a pressing concern. Climate change, resource depletion, and population pressures create vulnerabilities on an unprecedented scale. Stickman figures show drought-stricken farmlands, rising seas encroaching on cities, and icons of grain and water fluctuating. Modern technology and global cooperation offer mitigation, sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, and equitable distribution. Yet imbalance in policy, governance, or culture can tip the scales toward catastrophe. The black horse reminds humanity that foresight and stewardship are crucial to prevent suffering before it begins. The pale horse, still pale as death, reminds humanity of fragility. Emerging diseases, aging populations, environmental hazards, and global crises amplify mortality. Stickman icons show hospitals, emergency responders, and communities prepared for disaster. Medical innovation, public health measures, and social responsibility act as shields, slowing the pale horse's march. Yet the inevitability of mortality remains, challenging humanity to value life, protect the vulnerable, and act with foresight. Predicting the future requires connecting these riders to human behavior. Minimalist infographic visuals illustrate feedback loops. Ambition leads to competition, which can trigger conflict. Scarcity exacerbates mortality. Neglect of one area magnifies vulnerability in others. Stickman arrows trace causal chains, demonstrating that prophecy is not destiny, but a mirror for decision-making. The more humanity understands the interplay of these forces, the better prepared it can be. Some scenarios are subtle. Economic collapse in one region can ripple globally. Modern technology can both spread and prevent conflict. Environmental mismanagement can trigger famine in unexpected ways. Stickman icons illustrate interconnectedness. A drought here, a protest there, a virus outbreak elsewhere, all linked by invisible threads. The horsemen are both literal and metaphorical representations of these risks, and understanding their modern expressions is essential for mitigation. Yet there is hope embedded in projection. Minimalist visuals show communities innovating, floating farms in flood-prone areas, renewable energy grids, international disaster response networks, educational programs countering hate and division. The horsemen are still present, but their impact is tempered by foresight, collaboration, and resilience. Each stickman figure represents action, planting crops, teaching children, vaccinating communities, negotiating peace. Small acts compound into systemic countermeasures against the rider's influence. Technology plays a dual role. It can amplify the horsemen or diminish them. Cyber warfare, misinformation, and automation can accelerate conquest, violence, scarcity, and vulnerability. But the same technology enables predictive analytics, global coordination, rapid response to crises, and knowledge sharing at scale. Minimalist stickman animations overlay icons of servers, satellites, and communication lines, showing the potential to anticipate threats and react before catastrophe strikes. Humanity's choices, how technology is deployed, who has access, and how knowledge is shared, determine which path unfolds. Cultural awareness is equally critical. Stickman icons show schools, communities, and public campaigns, arrows indicating the spread of education and awareness. Societies that learn from history, recognize patterns of ambition, conflict, scarcity, and mortality, and act proactively, reduce the horseman's power. Those that ignore lessons repeat the cycles. The future, like the past, is a dance between the rider's influence and human agency. Even environmental challenges echo the prophecy. Minimalist visuals depict stickman cities threatened by rising seas, wildfires, and storms. The black and pale horses converge here, scarcity of resources feeding mortality risks. Yet innovative urban planning, sustainable energy, and global cooperation act as shields. The horsemen are present, but human preparation and foresight shape the scale of impact. As we peer forward, the interplay of human action and prophecy becomes stark. Stickman animations illustrate multiple potential scenarios. Unchecked ambition sparks regional conflict. Neglect of resources triggers famine. Failure to address disease increases mortality. Conversely, proactive diplomacy, equitable resource distribution, and medical innovation soften every rider's influence. Minimalist arrows and flowcharts emphasize that even in a chaotic world, choices matter, and action can redirect the trajectory of the Four Horsemen. Psychology and perception play a role too. Fear, division, and complacency feed the horsemen. Hope, resilience, and solidarity slow them. Stickman figures representing families, communities, and nations demonstrate this. Cooperative behavior, empathy, and foresight act as protective forces. The prophecy is a tool for reflection, a guide for strategic thinking, and a challenge to respond wisely to patterns repeating across time. Even the most unlikely scenarios are within reach. Minimalist stickman icons illustrate space exploration, AI-managed agriculture, and global disease monitoring, showing how innovation may buffer humanity against the horsemen. Yet the prophecy's lesson remains. Human choice is decisive. The horsemen amplify the weaknesses we fail to address. Their shadows recede where we act with intelligence, courage, and compassion. The future, then, is not a distant, inevitable doom. It is a landscape shaped by human awareness and action. Minimalist visuals overlay maps with arrows showing intervention zones, stickman figures taking strategic steps, and icons representing resources, health, and diplomacy. The Four Horsemen remain, but humanity's capacity to influence their impact has never been greater. Ultimately, predicting the future is about recognizing patterns, anticipating consequences, and acting decisively. The white horse, red horse, black horse, and pale horse remain forces of influence, but they are also indicators. Ambition unchecked, conflict unresolved, scarcity mismanaged, and mortality neglected. Stickman visuals demonstrate the chain of cause and effect, making prophecy actionable rather than fatalistic. The world watches, waits, and acts. Minimalist stickman icons across continents show preparedness drills, diplomatic summits, scientific research, and community action. Every choice made today shapes the horseman's influence tomorrow. The prophecy, once ancient and abstract, becomes a living guide, instructing humanity on vigilance, foresight, and moral responsibility. The Four Horsemen, though persistent and powerful, are not omnipotent. Their march is continuous, yet modifiable. Humanity stands as both witness and actor, with the ability to mitigate their path, soften their impact, and protect life. Stickman visuals emphasize that agency, foresight, and action are the ultimate counterforces. And so, the future is not predetermined, it is a balance. The Four Horsemen ride, shadows looming, but humanity's awareness, courage, and ingenuity determine the contours of tomorrow. Minimalist visuals pause on a global map, horse icons still present, but arrows of intervention flowing from every continent, a testament to the enduring possibility of hope, preparation, and action. The stage is set. The riders remain. Humanity stands ready, not as passive observers, but as participants capable of shaping destiny. The prophecy lives, but so does the power to act, and with it, the promise of resilience and survival. The Four Horsemen have ridden across history, across maps, and into our lives, not as myths, not as distant warnings, but as reflections of human action, choice, and consequence. Stickman icons fade in and out over maps, swords, scales, bread, and virus icons pulsating as reminders. Conquest, violence, scarcity, and death are ever-present forces, yet they are not autonomous. They are mirrors, shadows cast by human decisions. From ancient empires to modern nations, their presence has been felt in every era. The white horse rides wherever unchecked ambition exists. The red horse follows hatred and conflict. The black horse shadows scarcity and mismanagement, and the pale horse moves quietly behind, inevitable but shaped by the paths the others carve. Minimalist stickman visuals show each rider's path intersecting with human action, leaders, communities, and individuals affecting the spread and impact of each force. Yet the lesson is not despair, it is awareness. The horsemen are not arbiters of fate. They are indicators, warnings, and catalysts for reflection. Humanity is challenged to see their influence in every decision, every system, every relationship. The white horse asks, are we ambitious with wisdom or with reckless pride? The red horse asks, do we nurture understanding or allow hatred to fester? The black horse asks, do we manage resources equitably or leave scarcity to breed suffering? The pale horse asks, do we protect life, care for the vulnerable, and prepare wisely, or ignore mortality until it strikes? Stories from history and modern life illustrate this interplay. Stickman figures display famine relief efforts, peace negotiations, medical interventions, and acts of diplomacy. Each small act alters the trajectory of the riders, softening their shadows and redirecting their influence. The horsemen do not operate independently. They are shaped by the moral and practical choices of every generation. Each arrow, each icon, each stickman represents an action, a ripple, a consequence. Even in the modern world, these forces remain visible, but not invincible. The white horse meets global diplomacy and strategic alliances, mitigating conquest's destructive force. The red horse encounters education, dialogue, and reconciliation efforts, tempering violence. The black horse is countered by technological innovation, equitable policies, and humanitarian aid, alleviating scarcity. The pale horse is slowed by modern medicine, disaster preparedness, and social responsibility, softening the inevitability of mortality. Minimalist visuals show these interventions as glowing arrows intersecting the horsemen's paths, demonstrating cause and effect. But awareness alone is insufficient. Action is required. Every decision, large or small, scales into impact. Stickman icons illustrate farmers innovating irrigation, doctors administering vaccines, teachers spreading knowledge, and leaders signing policies. The Four Horsemen respond to human effort. They are amplified by neglect and diminished by proactive engagement. Humanity is both the fuel and the brake for these timeless forces. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in personal responsibility. Individual choices ripple outward into communities and nations. A single act of compassion can mitigate violence. A single effort at resource management can prevent scarcity. Foresight and preparation can protect life. Minimalist stickman visuals illustrate one figure planting crops, another negotiating peace, another treating patients, and arrows tracing the impact across maps. The horsemen are present, but they are not omnipotent. Agency matters. Another lesson emerges in interconnectedness. The horsemen's influence is global. Famine in one region impacts economies elsewhere. Conflict displaces populations, affecting distant nations. Pandemics travel across continents. Minimalist visuals connect stickman figures across maps, showing the invisible threads linking ambition, violence, scarcity, and mortality. Humanity's response, therefore, must be collaborative. No nation, community, or individual stands isolated from the writer's reach. Awareness, preparation, and action are most effective when combined and coordinated. The prophecy is also a mirror of values. How societies respond to the horsemen reflects priorities. Do we protect the vulnerable, care for the weak, and act with foresight? Or do we prioritize short-term gain, pride, or neglect? Stickman animations juxtapose communities that act with compassion against those that ignore warning signs. The contrast is clear. The horsemen's shadows are longest where humanity fails, and lightest where humanity engages with wisdom, courage, and empathy. Even the modern tools of prediction and innovation are moral tests. Technology, data, and communication networks can amplify destruction or mitigate it. Minimalist icons show satellites, servers, and drones facilitating relief and awareness, arrows flowing toward zones of risk. The Four Horsemen are reflected in how we choose to use knowledge and power. Conquest becomes leadership when ethical, violence becomes restraint when informed, scarcity is reduced when shared, and death's impact is softened when life is valued. History, stories, and projections converge on one truth. The Four Horsemen are not enemies to be defeated. They are teachers. Their presence forces reflection on priorities, actions, and the systems humanity builds. They show the consequences of greed, pride, neglect, and inaction. Minimalist visuals overlay stickman figures learning, acting, and innovating, arrows from past to present to future emphasizing continuity. The writer's march is a lesson writ large across time, urging vigilance and wisdom. And yet, there is hope. The same forces that amplify destruction also inspire resilience. Stickman icons demonstrate collaboration, compassion, and courage spreading across maps. Every intervention, every act of foresight, every ethical choice sends ripples that reshape the horsemen's paths. Humanity is capable of redirecting prophecy, softening its shadow, and creating a more balanced, resilient world. The horsemen remain present, but they are not absolute. Ultimately, the conclusion is both sobering and empowering. The Four Horsemen illustrate inevitability and consequence, warning and reflection. Stickman visuals pause over maps, horse icons subtly visible, arrows tracing human response, showing that history and prophecy are intertwined. Humanity is never merely passive. Action and awareness determine the shape of the world. Every choice matters. Every act counts. Every intervention, no matter how small, has power. The prophecy's final message is clear. The horsemen will ride as long as ambition, hatred, scarcity, and mortality exist. But humanity is capable of steering the ride. Awareness, courage, foresight, compassion, and collaboration are the ultimate tools to mitigate their march. Minimalist stickman visuals illustrate communities acting globally, arrows intersecting and redirecting horse icons, reinforcing that destiny is influenced by action. In the end, the Four Horsemen are both shadow and mirror, showing what happens when humanity ignores consequences and what is possible when it acts with wisdom. They are reminders, not dictators. Minimalist icons fade into stickman figures building, helping, leading, and healing. History, prophecy, and modern reality converge. The power to act, to choose, and to create hope is in human hands. And so the story concludes, but the march continues. The Four Horsemen ride, but humanity stands, not as passive witnesses, but as active participants, capable of learning, adapting, and mitigating the shadows cast across generations. Stickman visuals pause on a global map, horse icons lingering faintly, arrows of intervention pulsing brightly, leaving viewers with a single, enduring message. Awareness without action is incomplete. Action guided by wisdom is transformative, and the future is written by those who dare to engage with the prophecy rather than fear it. The Four Horsemen remain, persistent and present, yet humanity's resilience, foresight, and compassion offer a counterforce that is just as powerful. Minimalist visuals fade to a central stickman figure, arms raised, surrounded by icons of peace, abundance, and health, symbolizing the potential to reshape destiny. The final frame lingers, a visual testament. Prophecy is not fate, but a call to act. The lesson endures. See, reflect, and respond, for the rider's shadows are long, but they are not unchallenged.